Clouds are disappearing, skies are turning blue. Only just a while ago, I told him I was through. He did not rebuke me, but with arms of strong embrace, picked me up and carried me into a field of grace, where all is quiet, leaning on his breast. He pulled me from a stormy sea to a place where I could rest, told me I was loved, told me I was safe, and I could stay till healing came in this holy field of grace. Had to pass through deserts, had to face strong winds. I don't mind them all that much, I know he'll come again. Lead me to still waters, there he'll let me stay, till my soul has been restored in this healing field of grace, where all is quiet, leaning on his breast. He pulled me from a stormy sea to a place where I could rest, told me I was loved, told me I was safe, and I could stay till healing came in this holy field of grace. And I could stay till healing came in this holy field of grace.
Well, amen. I appreciate that, Luke. It has been my pleasure. I was talking to his dad the other day. His dad called me about becoming pastor and congratulated us. And I just, it's been a true pleasure for me to be able to have all of his boys here. And I told him how much I appreciated him entrusting us with those young men and being able to be a part and training them. And so I feel that way about all of you, both in the high school and in the college. You know, it's part of our service here and our ministry, and just being able to invest in your lives. And someone who does that and has partnered with us to invest in our college's life and loves the ministry of Landmark is Brother Setzer. Pastor Setzer is invested in our college, and he lets you come over and preach. You want to talk about somebody that loves you, that's somebody that'll give you his pulpit and wants to invest in your life and help encourage you. And so, Pastor Setzer, you come and preach to us, my brother.
Make sure my mic is on. Does my microphone work? Appreciate the song. There it is. Is that a Martin Jr.? Martin Jr.? Yeah, what would you play in there? No, sir, it's not. It's not? I don't think it's a knockoff. Dr. Bradley. Oh, Dr. Bradley sold you a knockoff Martin Jr. All right. Brother Bradley, I want to apologize because I had every intention in this world to bring you a Fender guitar that was given to me, and I forgot to bring it. But don't worry about it. It's just a knockoff Fender anyways. So, what is that? Yes, yes.
Well, I asked before the service began, while everybody was coming in, which side was the smart side, because that's where I wanted to sit. And I just want you folks to know, the high school over here said they're the smart
Side. Do you have a response to that? You wish? You wish. Well, we do enjoy having Landmark students come and preach for us on the fourth Sunday night of the month. If you're allowed to and you have an opportunity, you're more than welcome to join them. If you can't sing, we might have you sing anyways while you're there. It sounded like I'm ringing just a little bit. Am I ringing? Might just a little bit? Okay. But anyways, we always enjoy having them there. People get tired of hearing the same voice all the time. You know, the Bible says a prophet is not without honor, save in his own country. You can preach a message at church and people yawn and doze and go to sleep. You see their face glowing blue because they're on their phone. But you preach the same message somewhere else and people say, oh, that was good, brother. That's her. You know how that goes. Yeah, so. But anyways, it's good to have that break. It's for our folks. Our folks love having Landmark students come and preach and sing. We always take that occasion to have ourselves a hot dog fellowship afterwards. And we don't have cheap hot dogs. They're either good all-beef hot dogs or they're Nathan's Famous hot dogs. And it's not just enough to boil them, because nothing will ruin a hot dog like boiling them. Turn it into this little rubbery thing that's hard to chew. You bite down on it, your teeth ricochet off of it. But we like to set a fire pit up outside, so you can take that already cooked hot dog, take it out, put it on a skewer, and charcoal that thing out there with Kingsford charcoal. You can turn that thing into a little briquette if you want to out on that fire. And that's what makes a hot dog good. It's got to have a good snap and crunch to it, right? Put some mustard on there, maybe a little relish, maybe some of those banana peppers. No ketchup, no ketchup. The Bible plainly says if you want to defile a hot dog, you put ketchup on it. Never put ketchup on a hot dog. If anybody's been in Chicago, you know that's the rule. Never put ketchup on a hot dog. And so, you can put ketchup on your scrambled eggs if you want, but never on a hot dog. Oh, that's nasty, isn't it? Who does the ketchup on the scrambled eggs? Are you serious? I'm changing my message this morning. Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. So anyways, do appreciate the opportunity to come here. I was nervous about today, and I tell you why I'm nervous. I'm always nervous before I speak. And it's not so much speaking to you, but my nervousness is always about whether or not what I have to say is of any value to you. I was thinking back on my college days. It seems like the flood had just receded and just a few students there. And I was trying to think of all the college services or chapel service I had attended, and I was trying to think of all the messages that I could remember. Because I really believe that a good message is one that stays with you. And I was trying to think of all the messages I remember. I remember a message concerning the tortoise and the hare, but I can't remember the preacher's name. But I remember the story, the tortoise and the hare, so the truth still stuck with me. I remember hearing B.R. Lakin preach on heaven. By the time B.R. Lakin got done preaching on heaven, everybody was waving their hankies and wanting to load up on a bus to go by the time he got done preaching on heaven. I remember Lester Roloff preaching Pawing in the Valley. I remember that. I remember R.G. Lee walking to the pulpit with his Bible, closing it, setting it down in front of him, putting his hands on the Bible, and saying, I'd like to introduce to you today the characters of my story. Ahab, the vile human toad that squatted on the throne of a nation. Jezebel, the venomous viper that coiled herself around the throne. And he preached payday someday by memory, quoting all the verses by memory. Of course, he had preached it over 1,500 times by then. I remember that message. But I don't really remember too many more. And my fear is that today, that what I have to say will be something that will fade into oblivion and you'll never remember it. So remember this. Remember this. I want to talk to you today about something that everyone in this room is going to have to face someday if you're going to serve the Lord. How many believe that whether you're in full-time ministry or not, you still need to be serving the Lord? How many believe that? How many believe that what God has for you to do is all designed to glorify God? Not ourselves, not anybody else. It's all designed to glorify God. I want you to understand, before I begin the message, that God is God, and he's all that he says he is. God is God, and he's all that he says he is. And not only is God all that he says he is, but God loves you more than you can understand. God has a plan and a purpose for everyone in this room. The problem is our plans get in the way of God's plans. And there will everyone in this room, you'll come to a point in your life where you're going to have a reckoning. Everyone will. Every great biography of great men that I've read, every one of them has given a story about where they had to have a reckoning with God. From Finney to the Wesleys to Moody, Jack Hyles, Old Testament saints, prophets, there's always a time of reckoning. You're not going to escape it. You're going to come to that point in your life. You will, and you need to be prepared for that. Let's turn our Bibles to John chapter 21. There is a great a great reckoning here. John 21. Jesus has been crucified, buried, risen again. He has shown himself and revealed himself to Mary and the disciples, the two disciples on the road to Emmaus. You remember that story? After his resurrection, two disciples were on the road to Emmaus. They appeared to be very despondent or discouraged. They were downcast. Jesus, veiling himself so they would not recognize him, approached them and asked them why they're so sad or why this countenance on their face. And the two disciples' response to Jesus was, well, haven't you heard? Haven't you heard? And they began to relay the story of what happened to Jesus. Of course, not knowing that they're actually talking to Jesus Christ himself. They get to their destination, and they try to encourage Jesus to come in and spend the evening with them, to dine with them, or to sup with them. And he does, and they sit down to eat. But before they eat, Jesus takes the bread and he breaks it and gives thanks. And as soon as he gives thanks, the disciples recognized him. Maybe it's just the way he said, Father, that they recognized because they heard that back in the upper room at the Last Supper. But they recognized him. And immediately Jesus vanished from their presence. They ran back to where they came from, telling everybody that they had seen Jesus Christ. He is risen. They've seen him alive. And so Jesus Christ has shown himself to his disciples multiple times now after his resurrection. And we get to this fishing story here in John chapter 21. Everybody follow me so far? Okay, if somebody beside you is starting to doze, point to them, and I'll try to help them out. Brother Bradley? Okay, if you can stay awake through the end of the message, I'll give you a $1 bill. See if that helps out. Works with junior church. But anyways. John chapter 21, starting with verse 1. After these things, Jesus showed himself again to the disciples at the Sea of Tiberias, and on this wise showed he himself. There were together Simon Peter and Thomas called Didymus, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, and the sons of Zebedee, which would be James and John, the sons of Zebedee, and two other of his disciples. Simon Peter saith unto them, I go a-fishing. They said unto him, We also go with thee. They went forth and entered into a ship immediately, and that night they caught nothing. So this is after the resurrection of Christ. He has not yet ascended up to heaven. But here's Peter resorting to what he knows to do. I go fishing. Where did Jesus Christ find him initially? Fishing. And he said to him, Follow me and I'll make you what? Fishers of men. And immediately they left all and they followed him. But now that Jesus Christ has been crucified, buried, and risen again, you can almost hear the disciples say amongst themselves, what do we do now? He's been with us for 3 years. We have prayed with him. We've watched him pray. We've dined with him or supped with him. We've walked with him. He has taught us. What do we do now? A church without a leader. or disciples without their leader. What are we going to do now? I was going to say it's like a church without a leader. What are we going to do now? Peter, well, I'm going fishing. So he says that to the other disciples that are with him. They all get in the boat. They go out in the lake or into the sea to fish. And that night they caught nothing. Now you have to understand something. This is something Peter knows how to do. This is something the other disciples know how to do. You would think they would know how to fish and catch fish. I'm not particularly a fisherman. My mom and my dad are, my brother are, my brothers are, my son, they're fishermen. I don't really particularly like going somewhere and just waiting. Now, if fishing involved diving in the water and grabbing the fish, that would be more exciting. But just waiting, cane pole and a bobber, just sitting there on the shore watching that bobber, see if it goes up and down, waiting to catch fish, I can think of better things to do with my time. Now, some people say, well, that's the whole point, just sitting there on the shore watching a bobber. Or going out in a boat, casting it towards shore. A good fisherman, they know how to fish, and they know where to fish, and they know how to catch fish. But here's Peter and the disciples out in the boat doing what Peter knows how to do, and that night they caught what? Nothing. The sun comes up the next day, and in the morning, there's someone standing on shore, has a fire going, and on that fire is fish and there's bread. The person calls out from the shore, catch anything? Have you any meat? Catch you anything? No, we fished all night, haven't caught a thing. So we'll cast the net on the right side. And you need to know this. You always need to cast the net on the right side. Always stay to the right. So they cast the net on the right side, and they caught so many fish they could hardly get them into the boat. The net didn't break, but it nearly broke. Just caught tons of fish. And then Peter recognized that that person standing on the shore is none other than the Lord. So Peter grabbed up his clothes, jumped in the water, and beat at the shore. And I'm not sure how that looked, but it must have been mighty interesting. Peter is always inclined to jump out of a boat for some reason. I don't know why. Went on up to shore. The other disciples came in. There was Jesus with bread and fish upon the fire. This is exciting. There's the Lord. There's our leader. Yes! But in this exciting reunion here, Jesus has a different plan. Let's start with verse 15. So when they had dined, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of Joseph. Now this is like your mom calling you by your full name. Paco, what's your full name?
Francisco Javier Chavez Cruz.
Yeah, okay, that. It's like, Paco, la, 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 Cruz, get up here. You know you're in trouble, right? Michael Stephen says, get your carcass up here to this bedroom. Make that bed. That's what my wife said to me last week. But anyways, Jesus is calling him by his name, full name. Simon Peter, son of Jonas, lovest thou me more than these? You have to put yourself in this place, on this shore at that time. What were they doing all the night before? Fishing. What did Jesus Christ call them to do? Fish for men. What did he just spend the last 3 years training them to do? Fish for men. And yet now, in his absence, they've gone back to fishing for fish. He has there on the fire in front of him bread and fish on the fire. You can almost see Jesus standing there looking at Peter and said, Simon Peter, lovest thou me more than these? Pointing to the fish on the fire. This is a time of reckoning. You could say it like this. Peter, what did I call you to do? Well, you called me to fish for men. What did I call you to do? Called you to fish for men. And yet you're fishing for these. I didn't call you to go out there in a boat, in the water, and fish. I called you to fish for men. You could almost hear that in his voice. Simon, Simon Peter, son of Jonas, lovest thou me more than these? Simon's response, or Peter's response is, yes. Yea, Lord, thou knowest that I love thee. And he said unto him, Feed my lambs. He said to him again, second time, Simon, son of Jonas, lovest thou me? He saith unto him, Yea, Lord, thou knowest that I love thee. He saith unto him, Feed my sheep. He said unto him a third time, Simon, son of Jonas, lovest thou me? Peter was grieved because he said unto him the third time, Lovest thou me? And he said unto him, Lord, thou knowest all things. Thou knowest that I love thee. Jesus saith unto him, Feed my sheep. In other words, you get back to doing what I called you to do. I didn't call you to go out fishing in a boat. I called you to feed my lambs. I called you to feed my sheep. I called you to feed my sheep. Now do it. Follow me. Which echoes back to his original calling, follow me and I'll make you fishers of men. Follow me. This was a moment of reckoning for Peter. When Jesus was absent and some of the disciples were in despair, not knowing what to do, and they're kind of left on their own, now it's up to them to carry on the work and the ministry and the purpose of Christ. It's up to them now. They don't know what to do. Peter said, I'm going fishing. Peter's just brought to a point of reckoning, doing what God called him to do or doing what he knew to do. And every one of you sitting in this room are going to come to a point in your life when you're going to have to make a decision, do what God called you to do or do what you want to do or what you know to do. Everyone's going to come to that point in time. Everyone. I'm going to tell you some things this morning that I'm not proud of. They are a long time in my past. And I don't tell them so that you might be enamored by any of this kind of stuff. But I had to come to a point in reckoning when it comes to serving the Lord. I grew up from age 9 to 17 when I graduated from high school. I graduated from a public school. Back in those days, Christian schools weren't all that common. I graduated from Minster High School. As a student, I really didn't have to do anything in class to pass. Just listen and pay attention, and if I could just get a D, I'd pass. I'd go on to the next grade. So I graduated from high school without really ever having to put much effort into it. I did take books home from school every now and then, just so Mom would think that I was doing homework. But I didn't do any homework, didn't need to pass. I graduated from high school. From age 9 on up, we've always been part of an independent fundamental Baptist church. My interest was more in the youth activities and my buddies and friends at the church. We always goofed around at the church. That was our focal point as teenagers. What are you doing? I don't know. Let's go to the church. We'd all go to church and hang out at the church. It was called Calvary Chapel Baptist Church in Minster, Ohio. The pastor was Ron Bowman. We'd just hang out at the church. Well, I went off to Bible college. Dad took me on a tour, and we visited a bunch of colleges. At that time, we visited Cedarville College. We visited what used to be called Lynchburg Baptist College. We visited Pensacola College. We visited Tennessee Temple for their college days. When my dad asked me, what college you going to go to? I don't know. Pastor I grew up with went to Tennessee Temple, and Dad said, no, I think you need to go to Hyles-Anderson. I said, okay. Because I really didn't want to go to college anyways. If you were to ask me at that time, what are you going to do now after graduating from high school? You know what my answer would have been? Buy a car. Ooh, that's really planning for the future, isn't it? What are you going to do when you graduate? Buy a car. How are you going to do that? I don't know. That was my plan. Buy a car. Get a job. Buy a car. That's now you're going to go to college, Hyles-Anderson. So I went to Hyles-Anderson College. Understand now that I went to college not ever really having to apply myself to anything to graduate. Not really having any great aspirations for ministry or anything like that. I was just going to go to college, enroll in Christian education courses. Didn't want to take pastoral theology because then you'd have to take Greek. So I didn't want to do that, so I just signed up for Christian education. My first 2 years of college were a mess. I just goofed around. I didn't study for anything. I failed a lot of classes. I never had to study in high school, but I found out something. In college, they don't just pass you on. I don't think they do they? Do you ever pass a student on just because they're nice guys? Do you ever pass students on just because you worked hard at it, bless your heart, you get to go on? I found out in college, you don't pass unless you put some work into it. You have to learn to study. I did not know how to study until I went to college. And it was several years into college before I figured out how I can study best and get a good grade. And so I just goofed around. I failed a bunch of classes. And by the way, you're the only folks I've ever told this to. I failed a bunch of classes. I really was a shame to my mom and my dad with my college behavior. Of course, they didn't know what was going on. I was out on my own now, just like Peter was now on his own. I goofed around in the dormitories. I thought it'd be a bright idea one time. The dormitories were all sort of single-story dorms there at Baptist City, and they were sort of designed to be senior citizens apartments. So each one of the dorm rooms had attic access. And so I got the bright idea one day I'd climb up that attic access, crawl down through the attic to a room at the other end of the building, pull up their attic access door, and drop a smoke bomb down in their dorm room. Crawl back through the attic, down in my apartment, and then stand outside the door and watch. Sure enough, down at the end of the door comes flying open, smoke's rolling out the door, and all the guys in the dorm are running outside, hollering and hooting at each other. I'm sitting there thinking, that's kind of funny. I snuck down around behind the dormitories one time. It's a hot summer day. Windows are open. No air conditioning in these dorms. Windows are open. People had their box fans sitting up in their windows. Of course, they were sucking cool air in from outside and blowing the cool air inside, so I decided I'm going to stick a smoke bomb on that window ledge and let that fan draw that smoke in and blow it through the dorms. I did that too. Then walk around the other side and watch them come running out of their dorms. I thought that was funny. Good time. I escaped the security guard's attention. Nobody knew what happened, but I sure enjoyed watching it happen. A roommate and I one time got the bright idea to fire off little rockets in our dormitory room. We took a book of matches, and we tear a match off, wrap tinfoil around the head of it, the end of it, make like a little rocket, set it on the edge of our desk, hold another match underneath of that tinfoil, it'd heat up, ignite the match inside the tinfoil, it exhausts out the backside of the match, and send it across the room. We were having a good time trying to launch those things into garbage cans and stuff like that. We turned the lights off just so we could see the fireworks in the dormitory room. Then there was a knock at the door. Opened up the door, there's a porch light outside, and all the smoke from inside the dorm room, which we were not aware of because the lights were off, the smoke went rolling out the door right past the security guard who was standing there. The security guard looked at me and said, "Are you setting off fireworks in here?" No. Matches, but not fireworks. Said, "Come with me." That was not a pleasant trip. I ended up living the next several months in the Hammond City Rescue Mission. I was too embarrassed to go back home a failure. I'd been kicked out of college. And so instead of going back home and telling my parents about it, I just went down and registered at the Hammond City Rescue Mission. The agreement was you had to either pay $15 a week to live there or work 15 hours a week to live there. And the property's around First Baptist Church Hammond. So I just gave them $15. The mission was basically run by the mission people themselves. Whoever happened to be there in the mission was the cook. I can't tell you how many times I looked at a bowl of gravy and it was just clear with a little bit of brown stuff down in the bottom. You had to stir it up before you poured it over your burnt toast. That was breakfast. Coffee, transparent gravy, and burnt toast for breakfast. When I slept at night, All my earthly goods were in a little cardboard box at the foot of my bed. Got up one morning and I heard one of the mission men in the shower. He was playing a radio, and I looked down at the end of my bed, and the radio was gone out of my cardboard box. Walked into the shower room, and there was a mission person in the shower with my radio. Of course, the radio was ruined after that. Had to sleep with my billfold in my hand, in my pillow, with my head on the pillow, because if I didn't, I'd wake up the next day without a billfold. At nighttime, you could hear people banging on the walls in different rooms as they, in their nightmares, would relive some of their horrifying events. You would hear them swearing and cussing and pounding on the walls at nighttime. It was a terrible place. I worked at UPS in downtown Chicago. I'd have to hire a taxi to get to work. It cost me $20 to get to work and $20 to get home. I made no money. I kept my job, but I made no money, because I was constantly getting in a taxi to go up to Chicago to work a job. Those were miserable years, horrible years. I want to ask you a question. Who brought that on me? Myself. I chose to do what I wanted to do, not what God wanted me to do. I remember it was transferring over to another semester, and I thought, well, maybe I'll call back and see if I can get re-enrolled in college and get back in the dorms. So I called the college and talked to a man at that time, Brent Holliday. He was in charge of he was the dean of the men. And I asked if I could re-enroll in college. He said, well, actually you can, but it's going to have to go before the board. And the board really consisted of a Saturday morning meeting with Dr. Hiles, where all the ministries would bring up their questions to Dr. Hiles, and that's where they voted on things like that. And so Brother Holliday told me to call back. And he'd give me the answer after that meeting. So I called back. Brother Holliday said, Mike, I'm sorry to tell you, but they don't think you're ready to come back yet. You're not allowed back in school. What am I going to do? I called Dr. Wendell Evans, the president of the college. And I pleaded my case with Dr. Wendell Evans on the phone. How I got his number, I don't recall. All I know is I called him. I remember it was at night. I was in a phone booth outside the Hammond City Rescue Mission. Dr. Evans, why can't I come back to college? I'll pay my bills. I'll do what I'm supposed to do. And Dr. Wendell Evans said to me on that phone, Mike, you just need to grow up. And that was the end of that conversation. I was brought to a point of reckoning. Lovest thou me more than these? Everyone in this room is going to come to a point like that in your life, where you're going to have to make a decision. What are you going to do? You going to follow God, or are you going to follow your own course? And know this to be a truth. You can follow your own course, but it will always end up in less than a satisfying condition. Always. The only way that we can achieve any manner of success in this life is we live according to God's word, God's will, doing things God's way, and then we will be blessed by God. It was at that point in time then I knew I had to go back home and face the music with Mom and Dad and everybody else in church and all my friends at church who were going to be asking me, why aren't you in college? And I'd have to tell them why. You know why? It's because I was stupid. Dr. Evans was right. I just needed to grow up. I don't know if you fully comprehend this or not, but for some reason or other, we have this in our mind that our teenage years are years where we get to have some adult-like activity and fun, but we can somehow be irresponsible too. But what we need to comprehend is this. The Bible doesn't recognize teenage years. You go from infant to young child, and at age 12 or 13, you become a young adult. There's no goof-off time. There's no sow your wild oats and play and have a good time. No. Once we leave childhood, God holds us accountable. Now, I'm not trying to stir up any trouble here or anything, but I think too many of our church activities are just to have a good time when we need to be busy glorifying God and serving Him. Responsibility, adult-like responsibility. I went to Bible college like a kid. And in Bible college, the Lord smacked me down pretty good and told me I needed to grow up. I can make a choice. Lovest thou me more than these? Oh, yeah, Lord, you know I do. No. Do you love me more than these? Yes. Then do what I called you to do. God has a plan for each one of us, and every individual has something that God has designed for you that's greater than you can even imagine. But you're going to have to come to a time of reckoning where you surrender yourself to God. We reckon ourselves to be dead unto sin and deed, that we may glorify the Father, or live unto Him, be alive unto Him. A time of reckoning. You don't need to say what it is, but how many in this room have had that time of reckoning in your life? It's coming. If it hasn't already been there, it's coming. Right. Let me ask you this question. How many in this room come from a broken home? I think sometimes we think that's an excuse. Well, you know, the home was messed up. I should be granted a little latitude. That's not true. From the time God holds you responsible for your own actions and deeds, God will hold you responsible. I think that was kind of redundant, but I think you got the point. My last name by birth is not Setzer. My last name by birth is Smith. Now, most all of my life, I've grown up in the Setzer household, and my adopted name is Setzer. But my father's name was Smith. Stephen Bradford Smith. He has since died and gone on to glory. I cannot say that he was a good Christian man. He was a good moral man. We did talk to him about salvation. But for most of my life, I was estranged from my father. I came from a broken home. And that's always a mess. It's always awkward. The children pay the penalty of that for the entirety of their life. There's never a family reunion. There's never a birthday, graduation, wedding, funeral, never, where that doesn't become awkward when you're part of a broken family. My father, now let me qualify this here. My dad is Ron Setzer. He raised me. He is my dad. My father, though, he worked for the military. Worked for Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio, or outside of Dayton, Ohio. He was the head of, and his job title was acquisitions and purchases for the military overseas. My dad would go overseas, had the highest security clearance you could get. He would fly overseas. He would negotiate for fighter jets, fighter jet parts, Air Force equipment. He'd come back to the United States, present it to Congress. Congress would vote on it. My father negotiated for fighter jets with Saddam Hussein. Now, that sounds crazy. I asked my dad about that. So what was that like? He says, when you walked into the room, you instantly knew you were in the presence of evil. That was back when Iraq was fighting with Iran. The United States sold them aircraft in that fight. He was a very wealthy man. But I was estranged from him. Rarely ever did I get to see him. But just after my 16th birthday, I was at his house. In the garage of his house was a brand new, and every year he traded in and get a new one, had brand new Cadillac Fleetwood, black, gray leather interior. Sitting next to that in the garage was a silver anniversary Corvette. Outside the garage was his Jaguar he had imported from overseas. That was his beater car, the one he would take to work. After my 16th birthday, he called me out into the garage of his house, standing there between those cars. I'm 16. He says, "What do you think about these?" I thought, "Those are great cars." He said, "If you come live with me, you can drive these. You could take your girlfriends out on dates in these. You could take your girlfriend to the prom in that Corvette if you want, if you come live with me." What kind of choice is that to make for a 16-year-old? I just remember standing there just kind of dumbfounded. I didn't want to say anything because, for one, I didn't want to hurt my mom's feelings either. I said, "Well, I think I'll just stay where I'm at." Found out he did the same thing to my two brothers, too. Now, I want to tell you right now, had I chosen the wrong direction at that time, I would not be standing here today. I have stepsisters that are alcoholics. You see, there's certain things that come with wealth. It's usually neglect. I have sisters that are alcoholics. One's a drug addict. Stepsisters. They got to drive the Cadillacs. They got to drive the Corvettes. They got whatever they wanted, but their life's a mess. But God had a different course for me. Dad Setzer kept us in church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. If there's a 3 or 2 week revival. Remember when we had 2 week revivals? When we had 2 week revivals, we were in revival service every night. Before my dad was called into the ministry, he was an engineer for B.F. Goodrich. But still, we were in church every time the doors were open. My friends were the friends I had at church, and I think that's the only thing that spared me. Had I made a wrong decision when I was 16, I'd probably, who knows. But everyone in this room, you need to understand this. You're going to be confronted with major life choices. And it all boils down to this. Are you going to choose what God has for you to do, or are you going to do your own thing? Go your own way. You're going to have to make the choice. Simon Peter, son of Jonas, lovest thou me more than these? Yeah, Lord, you know I do. Then feed my lambs. Simon, lovest thou me more than these? Yeah, you know I do. Feed my sheep. Simon, lovest thou me more than these? Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Then feed my sheep. And he goes on to say, follow me. That's what I called you to do. Follow me. Every person who's been used by God has always had that point of reckoning where you have to make a choice. You're going to do what you want to do, what you know to do, or are you going to do what God's called you to do? Now, how many believe we're far better off doing what God's called us to do? We are. You're going to have to make a choice. Are you going to follow him or do your own thing? I'd like to have every head bowed and every eye closed. Father, we come to you at this time. Lord, just pray